Well, welcome back, everybody. It's Jack Graham and John Peterson with another We Talk Photo podcast. John, I think we at 130 yet?
130. This is 130 right
Wow.
now.
130. That's a lot.
It
Wow.
is. We've been doing this for a while, Jack.
Yeah, it's great. Well, and we try to have, excuse me, some really interesting folks on with us. And we're again joined by our 130th guest, though he's been here before, but it's been too long. Mr. David Cobb from Mosier, Oregon, east of Hood River, the dry part. And David, welcome back. Thank you for taking some time to be here.
Thanks for having me again. I think I was here with the whole Photo Cascadia team 1 year after our book, and then I was here early on in your
Yes, I
maybe
bet
in
you
the
were in the top 10.
top
Yeah.
10, 20, somewhere in there. So it's nice to be back and chatting with you guys again.
Yeah. And what are you up to?
I am right now, I'm working on some talks that I'm going to be giving next year and working on those, putting some photos together for presentations and I just returned from South Korea, and that was a great trip.
We're going to
And
talk about that.
yeah, we'll talk about that later. And then I've got some things planned for the spring and as far as travels too. So that'll
Did
be.
you miss all the political upheaval over there?
I did. I got back a few weeks before all of that happened when they went under martial law, which was a surprise to everybody, even the South Koreans. So
What was
it's
that about? You didn't cause any trouble there, did you?
It was me, yeah. Yeah, Sean Bagshaw and I were together, and
Ah,
and
it was
it was
Bagshaw.
something
That's who it
yeah, it
was.
was something we did. I don't know why, but they had to declare martial law, so it was us. You're right.
That's
Well, thank you
awesome.
for being here.
Thanks.
Yeah.
John, why don't you start off
Well,
the topic we kind of talked about today?
yeah, well let's just talk about your trip to Korea, South Korea, not North Korea, but you went
Yeah,
over with one of your photo Cascadia buds, Mr. Sean Bagshaw, and what precipitated this trip? You normally don't think of South Korea as a photographic destination, at least not on the popular radar.
it is not on the popular radar, and I I started thinking about going to South Korea many years ago, and I was thinking of doing, I had done long distance hiking in the past. I walked across the US a couple of times and the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge and Iceland and Yukon, Northwest Territories and stuff. And I just wanted another adventure. So I started thinking of South Korea as a possibility. And I found this book called Spirit of the Mountains. And I started looking through the photos at it. I found it at Powell's Books and started paging through it. And I liked it so much that I bought it and started looking at the pictures of the mountains. They weren't great photos, but they were interesting. And it kind of got my interest, piqued my interest. And so I started to think about walking the length of South Korea. And I started to plan a trip where I'd hit as many national parks, and there are a lot in South Korea, and as many temples as I could on my walk. And I kind of put it together through trails, connecting trails that I had managed to look for, and noticed later that there was actually a trail for almost the exact route that I had planned.
Wow.
So it's called the Bakdudagan Trail, and I know I'm really screwing that pronunciation out up. And then I found out these two guys, these intrepid travelers from New Zealand, were walking that trail, and they're going to write a guidebook on it after they were done. So I waited until they finished their guidebook, bought that, and started looking at more photos of South Korea. And then when the time was right, I was talking to Sean Bagshaw about going there and just to photograph this time and not do any cross-country travels or hiking. But we are going to circumnavigate the country. It's about the size of Oregon, so it wasn't too much to chew. We spent 3 weeks there. We made a list, top 10 things he wanted to see, top 10 things I wanted to see. then we compared our lists and we put the regions together of where those things were, and then plotted out a trip. And that's kind of what we did.
Wow. So what kind of things did you end up seeing and photographing?
Well, we landed in Seoul, actually Incheon, which is an hour away from the main city of Seoul, South Korea, and just tried to get over our jet lag and get used to the culture in a large city. That's a good place to do it. And a few things you find out really quickly is that coffee shops don't open until about 10 a.m. at the earliest. So if you're one of those people that need to wake up and get a cup of coffee before you get going, good luck. The other thing is if you go out to dinner, you better be with a friend, because if you're all by yourself for dinner, then it's just not, uh, they won't let you in. They're just like, yep, you can't sit down. It's a cultural thing. So you kind of have to eat in pairs. But from there, after photographing some of the temples around Seoul, we headed out to the east coast of South Korea along the coastline to a city called Sachko, and then went back into the mountains for the national park in that region, and also this place called Muring Gorge, which is beautiful, lots of waterfalls that kind of reminded me of the East Coast, kind of, Pennsylvania and New York kind of area. Uh, and then headed south towards Busan. But before that, we stopped at national parks along the way and coastlines along the way, and then went south to the tea fields, and then to the other side of the peninsula there, and on the west side of the spine of mountains that goes down South Korea, and then Soraksa National Park and Woriksa National Park, kind of in the south, and then heading north back towards Seoul to Woriksa, and back to Seoul. So there's a lot to see. The places are, we rented a car, and that's a whole nother story that I can get to a little bit more if you want. If you want
Yeah, I'd be curious
more
about
information
that.
on that. So yeah.
Yeah, I've been to Busan a couple of times and Taichung a couple of times, but I've never seen anything like some of the first pictures that I've seen coming out of you and Sean from this trip. It's just some spectacular images that you guys were able to capture there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And there was a city that we stayed at, and I was trying to get to a place closer to the national park, but they were all sold out. So I ended up getting a place a few hours away, or maybe an hour and a half away, which was as close as I could get to that place. But man, that city also had some just beautiful bamboo forests everywhere.
Yeah.
And we just spent all day there, and that wasn't in our itinerary at all. That was just, I was tired. And I just said, I kind of need a rest day. Was there anything around here we can photograph? And Sean found the bamboo forest, and we went off to it, and man, that was totally worth it.
Those
Totally
were
unexpected.
phenomenal.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was,
Yeah.
we had great weather for it, and it was just perfect for photography.
One of
So
the one of the images, I don't know if it was yours or Sean's that I saw, was the bamboo forest, and there was a young lady in a red raincoat down the path. I think it might have been
yeah,
Sean's.
that was Sean's,
Yeah.
and I saw her walk by, and Sean said, "Yeah, I just photographed her when she was clutching her purse behind her." And I said, "Oh, yeah, that's going to be a winner." So
Yeah, it was, and
it was.
that's what Jack would always tell me, the story of, back in the day, everybody would carry around red raincoats because red is such a powerful color, and boy, against the green bamboo, that is a spectacular image.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I had noticed her early, but he got that shot, and I'm happy for him. It's beautiful. So yeah, in the US you see the people with the reds and the yellows fighting the people with the oranges for places. So, and the selfie culture in South Korea is absolutely nuts. Just lines and
Um,
lines of people lined up for their selfies. And the trailheads were kind of an interesting beginning too. We'd go to a trailhead in a national park, and A trailhead in the US is there'd be a parking lot. It could be, around Mount Hood or something. It might be a dirt parking lot, and then you start walking, and there's a
Right.
place for maybe 5, 8 cars. But in South Korea, it's hiking is kind of a national sport. If it wasn't for ping pong, it probably would be the national sport. It's kind of a club deal, and you go with a bunch of friends, maybe 10, 20 people. You dress to the nines with your best hiking gear and start hiking. And when you get to a trailhead in South Korea, it is crowded, and there are probably 20 restaurants there. There are 3 hotels. There are gear
Whoa.
shops everywhere. It is a little city, and that's the trailhead. And there's a parking lot for 1,000 people, a parking lot for 400 people, a parking lot for 500 people further down, and then maybe another parking lot for another 1,000 people about 3 miles away. And
Wow.
it is crowded on the weekends and crowded midday. So
So the concept of going to nature for solitude and restoration is not, doesn't sound like that's quite the vibe.
yeah, it's not. I think the vibe is if you're all by yourself in the forest, you're kind of nuts. And there it's different. It's just culturally different than what we were expecting. But what we found out is that people in South Korea don't get moving that early. So if we got to a trailhead at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, then that was gold because no one was going in. And we'd have a 3.5 hour lead on everybody. And by the time we're coming out of our photography and hiking stint, then we're coming back, and that's when people are going in. So
Knowing you and Sean, I bet you went to some places that the general public didn't go to as well. Am I correct?
there's not a lot of places where the general public can't go. They have a well-developed trail system. There are a lot of stairs. So, some places we went where the general public probably doesn't go much, and the parking lot maybe had places for 20 cars. And by the time we got back that morning, it was a spectacular morning, but by the time we got back, 3 people were hiking in. And when we got to the parking lot, there were about 2 cars pulling in.
Yeah,
So
I don't know whether it's the Asian culture or what, but maybe they're just in better shape. But you know, the couple times, only a couple times, only 2 times, you've been up to where the snow monkeys are in Nagano in
I,
Japan.
I, I have not. Nope.
Okay, well, it's a from where you park, it's about, I bet it's a mile and a quarter, maybe mile and a half. And we went up there one time. It was they hadn't even blown the snow off the trails. Snow was a foot deep, and they was didn't stop anybody. Stopped me a little bit, but didn't stop the Asians. They're
Yeah.
just they're on a mission to do this stuff. God bless them. I mean, they're really dedicated and doesn't
Yeah.
seem to stop.
Yeah, there were staircases a lot of places, and I hate stairs on trails because they just wear you out.
Yeah.
So you'd go up 500 stairs, and then down 200, then back up 1,000, then down 100, and then back up 500.
Ooh,
And yeah, the people that live there are used to the steepness, and they're used to the stairs, and they're just blowing up those trails.
Yeah, good
And
for them.
it was 75 degrees and humid, and the humidity was killing me, uh, along with the jet lag early on. And I was gassing out. But a lot of people there were in winter coats and down coats, and I'm going, it's 75 degrees out.
And folks,
a
for those of you
Northwesterner.
who don't know David, David is in excellent shape. David is an avid hiker. We don't have the time here in this podcast for him to list where he's hiked and traversed literally all over the world. Um, everybody keeps saying I should do it. It had nothing to do with hiking, but you need to write a book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Speaking of books,
that's not
how's
one of
your
them.
not to change the subject, but how's your Japanese garden book doing? Is it still around?
Yeah, it actually the Quiet Beauty Japanese Gardens in
Yeah,
North America, it's done so well they actually just released it in paperback. So
terrific. Well,
Wow.
uh,
John, we need to put a link up for that.
For
And
sure I will. It's a
folks
beautiful
will
book.
have a
I
copy
love
for
my
a look at.
copy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah,
So
Did,
I
did
did
David,
two of those. So
oh,
yeah,
so
the first one did better than the second one. Um, but go ahead.
tell us
well,
about the car.
Oh, the rental car. Uh, Driving isn't that bad. Unlike Japan, you're not driving on the left side of the road. You're on the normal side that if you're living in the US, that's the side you drive on. So that wasn't bad. Now, uh, getting around is a bit more difficult. There's an app called Naver. So it was decided early on that I do all the driving because Sean hates driving in cities, but he's a great uh, instrument worker, and he knew that app backwards and
a
forwards.
technologist.
He is, and
Why am I
Yes.
not
I am
surprised?
more of a Luddite. So we took my strengths of driving and his strength of app work, and it worked out well. You want to get a high pass? It's called a high pass card that you buy for all the tolls, and you put that kind of in your roof, and then it just goes for the tolls. We probably spent 40,000 won, maybe more than that. And 40,000 won is $35.
Hmm.
So it's pretty inexpensive. You'd get this huge spread of a meal. It would cost $10. Nice hotels. Sean and I were splitting the cost for a hotel room. It was $62, probably $60. So we'd each pay 30. So
Wow.
once you're there, it's not too bad. And then we also got a Wi-Fi card at the airport. So you can get your phone, whatever phone provider you have, you probably have a program when you travel internationally, but I'd highly suggest getting a Wi-Fi card at the airport when you get to South Korea. Works well in Japan too. If you go to Japan, get a Wi-Fi card
Hmm.
there.
Yep.
But from that, we had Wi-Fi in the car anywhere we went, so we were always able to track us. And then when you're driving, there are cameras everywhere. So that's where that Naver app comes in really handy because it will tell you where the cameras are and will say, camera ahead, 1,000 meters, camera ahead, 500 meters,
So slow
and
down.
slow down. There are speed traps, speed cameras in some places every 1 or 2 kilometers. So it just is relentless. So you cannot drive above the speed limit there because the speed cameras will get you and you will pay before you leave the country. So
Did you get nailed?
I didn't.
Good for
We
you.
had the Naver app, and we also had an app in the car that we were also following, and with a high pass, and it all worked out well. So the car would tell us, and the app would tell us, and we were forewarned. So
Wow. So David, other than the bamboo forest that you found in the city, what was one of the most unexpected realizations that you came away with from a trip like that?
Uh, the peaks, it was worth the exercise because the peaks in South Korea, they kind of remind me of the North Cascades, those sharp, pointy peaks, but they have trees growing on them. You're only up about 5 to 6,000 feet, but they're spectacular. And they have waterfalls coming out near the tops of the peaks. And I'm just
Hmm.
thinking, where does that much water come from near a top of a mountain? I just don't see things like that in the States, period, anywhere. So seeing those high waterfalls were some of the best views I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen some nice ones and it was worth the effort and it was just beautiful up there.
Normally, you don't think of mountains in Korea. You just don't for some reason.
No, not a lot of people in the West think of that.
No.
But they do get a lot of business there. There are a lot of people, Indonesia, I think, Japan, and China. A lot of visitors from those countries that go to Korea, and not a lot of Anglos. So
I don't know anybody. I know people like Vietnam is a big destination now,
yeah,
and Thailand and stuff. But I don't know, John. Did you know anybody that's gone to Korea? I don't.
Not for pleasure, no, other than people, I went for work, but don't know anybody that's gone for pleasure. You're the first one, David.
Oh
okay.
well. Now
I've always
wait.
been an
Now wait.
anomaly.
Now you'll start the trend.
Yeah, now everybody's going to flock to Korea.
Yeah,
Hey,
there's actually, once we start to think about going places, there's some nice photographers that you can follow, like Terrence Lisi, Ryu, RYU, and also Nathan Mertz. And one or two of those, they lived up in the Seattle area, I believe,
hmm,
for a while, and they're living in Korea now. But they're really good photographers. And if you really want to get a idea of what Korea can look like too in all seasons, I would look at those photographers. They're king of the lone trees. We looked everywhere for lone trees. Once we started seeing their photos, we thought there'd be lone trees everywhere up there, and nope, didn't see them anywhere. Maybe one or two spots we got close, but that was about it. So,
How did you talk a little bit about what you took with you as far as equipment and provisions for photography?
I brought my usual bag, which is I have a Canon in the R series, and then I have a 1 to 500 millimeter lens and a 15 to 35 millimeter lens and a 24 to 105 millimeter and a 100 millimeter macro. So those are the lenses that I brought. As far as dress goes, one thing about Korea is it can go from very, very hot. In the fall, even, it can be hot, humid, and the temperature can drop quickly. So it gets well below zero there in the wintertime. It can snow like crazy. Uh, but when we were there, we left in the first week of October and came back October 31st, so Halloween. And from every place I looked at, it said, the last part of October is the best time for fall color in South Korea. But this year it was late. So really fall color started to hit there in mid-November to even the third week in November. So I think if I went back, I would probably go the last week of October and go into mid-November or late
Fall
November.
color's getting later and later every
it
year. In fact,
is.
when we set the date for our Eastern Sierra trip, I said to John, I said, John, what are we doing? We need to be there a week earlier. And of course, being the genius that Mr. Peterson is, he picked the dates, not me, and he nailed it. So
Nice.
everything's like a
Everything's
week
getting
later.
later.
Yeah, even, where I live in Mosier, the springs out here for the Columbia River Gorge wildflowers, it just seems like it's getting earlier.
They used to be like clockwork.
They used to be like clockwork, but now you can come mid-April and you know,
Yeah. So you took your regular stuff. Now you did all this planning. I guess what we were going to want to kind of talk about here, and I guess we are, is your preparation for this trip. This isn't like going to to Knoxville, Tennessee for a weekend. I mean, this
right.
is a lot of planning, and you spend a lot of time with maps and everything else. And is there any? I mean, is it all internet based, or is that a
Exercise too. Sean was he hikes, runs, or bikes every single day, and now he's into his foils and going
Yes.
we
across the
talked
lake
about
with
that?
his
Yeah,
sails. So
yeah.
that's a big thing he's doing now. And me, I try to hike 3 to 4 miles a day at least, and then I have in my area, I have my 400-foot hike, my 600-foot hike, and my 1,000-foot hike. So I try to hit those once a week if I can. Less so in winter because it gets pretty mucky. But I try to, for this, I was doing those hikes every single day, getting in shape because I knew, Sean was climbing places like Mount Shasta and going up those things, which is a 14,000 foot mountain. So
Right.
I wasn't doing that, but I know Sean being the mountain climber that when we go uphill, he kicks my ass anyway.
And for
So
those of you who are not knowing David, I don't want to say this is not like how I don't want to get too personal here, but let's just say David is not a young 30-year-old in shape person, but David and Sean, I mean, I got to tell you, I guess I want to say I envy you guys, but anybody could do this if they did it right. I'm just too damn lazy and too old, but um, again, it's a good point. John, how many times do we go somewhere and we don't have any major anything like what David did here, but we even see people who are huffing and puffing just
Oh
walking back
yeah,
to the car.
just basic stuff. Well, David, kind of on that note though, I mean, you guys definitely prepped for, the physicality of what you wanted to do. Are there opportunities for people that are not as physically fit?
yeah, there are a lot of temples in the area, and those are actually absolutely astounding and beautiful. And without taking the walks up the mountains, you can do that. And there's some beautiful coastlines. We were in a seaside city of Sachko, and there's a temple south of there, and then further south of there, there's some sea stacks that are just absolutely gorgeous. So the coastal
Hmm.
areas definitely on the east coast where the mountains are fabulous. And then some of the gorges, Muring Gorge, I mentioned that earlier. It's more of a level hike. There is some climbing up there, but you can take your time and there's waterfalls and a lot to see along there and a lot of beautiful trees. There are other national parks that will have maple lined trails, just absolutely gorgeous maples everywhere. And those were still green. So Sean and I kept walking through the forest at lower levels, going, can you imagine what this is going to look like when it is peak fall color?
Oh,
Because, mid-November, that must have been absolutely spectacular. There's another place called Sequoia Lined Road, which is a very popular destination, but it's sequoias that these particular sequoias turn yellow like the larch, yellow orangey like the larch up in the Pacific Northwest, and then drop their needles. So, these sequoias and the larch and also
They have tamarack.
cypress, the cypress and others, yeah, they do drop their needles in the fall. So you've got trees
fascinating.
like that around that also are beautiful. And then the tea areas or the rice paddy areas would be something lower level that you could photograph and not have to work out for. But if your interest is in the mountains, then you're going to need to do some hiking, and it's not easy hiking. It's strenuous to mid-strenuous kind of hiking.
Yeah, especially with a pack full of camera gear.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let me ask her. So you did a lot of preparation in terms of route finding and where you wanted to go, and you guys both made your list of places or things you might want to see. How much, and this term Jack and I always talk about, but how much did you visualize or anticipate what kind of photographs you wanted? Were you very specific, or were you just more general in terms of what kinds of things you wanted to come back with?
I think we were fairly general. And I think the specific images that we kept thinking about were those lone trees that I told you about. And we couldn't find them anywhere. So we finally started them. Once we got used to the trails and everything, we started to find where they probably were. And then it was time to leave. We thought there would be a lot more fog there. I've seen a lot of photos in South Korea where the valleys are filled with fog.
Mhm.
They have a lot of bendy trees that look the bark looks ponderosa like, but the trees are all twisted and gnarly and beautiful. Has that same kind of reddish color that Ponderosa do in the west. But we only had 2 foggy days the whole time we were there. And I think that fog came later in the fall, probably again closer to November. So this year we are just a touch early. And for what we probably envisioned, and but we came away with things that we didn't expect. So the Guianju area where all these burial mounds are in temples, that's another place for people that don't want to exercise or climb these mountains. So they have some great flat areas to walk around that are beautiful. The burial mounds are like the Palouse, these rolling hills,
Hmm.
and persimmon trees growing everywhere amongst those rolling hills. So that's something we didn't think of. And then there was this purple grass that was growing in that city, and we didn't envision that at all. And we came away with some beautiful shots from there that we never even thought about. So,
How
Yeah,
far north
yeah.
did you go?
well, Seoul was, our drive from Seoul to the East Coast was across the country, and that's only, it was probably a 2.5 hour drive. And from Seoul, we had to go a little bit further north than that, but definitely further south in the DMZ, or the demilitarized zone, with North Korea.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think just to kind of tie off that visualization of images thread was I think this is kind of a lesson for folks out there. Jack and I know you're this way too, David. It's be more reactive when you're in the field. I mean, when you are locked into a predefined expectation for what you want to photograph, you're shut off to all the other beauty around. And so being more open and receptive to the sights and sounds around you, I think increases your opportunity to come home with some beautiful photographs.
I absolutely agree. And yeah, there were a couple of things we had thought about, but what we saw and what we experienced, it was all new to us. So, it wasn't what we were expecting, but again, it was all new, and we were just open to it, and we're loving it. So, except for the crowds at the trailheads. So
Yeah.
once we figure that one out, just get there early.
Yeah, I
Good
could
to
just
go.
imagine, after being, because both you and Sean live in the Northwest and used to the trailheads up here, and where there's nobody, you're lucky to see another car sometimes. And
Exactly.
I can just imagine your faces when you rolled up to the first trailhead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Not what we were expecting at all.
yeah.
So I
So,
guess what you could do is you could just put how many, what's the population of Oregon, John, you know?
Nope. David?
I think now it's 4.2 million people.
Okay, well, there's about 50 million in Korea, if I
Yeah.
remember right.
When we looked that up when we were there, I think it was
Yeah.
57, 58 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wow.
Well, picture Oregon with 50 million people.
yeah,
Yeah, no.
exactly.
Yeah,
Uh,
no.
Exactly. So that's exactly how we described it, and that's how we thought of it. So you'd see a apartment forest everywhere, is what Sean called them. So
Mm.
all these skyscrapers where people lived in these kind of new cities. So
Yeah, high density housing.
yep,
Yep.
that's what's needed there. That's the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, many of those towns. What do you got cooking right now, David? What's your next thing?
Right now I've got some I'm going to be doing the out of Chicago live, and they actually asked if I would do the keynote this year, so I've been working
Oh,
on that, and I'll be doing out of Olympic with the same group, and in the fall Adrian Klein and I are doing the Route 66 and its 99th anniversary. We wanted to avoid the 100th when all the people would be there. So we plan on going from Albuquerque to Springfield, Missouri, and got a spot left there. And I'm also doing
When are you doing that, David?
that's going to be in April.
Uh-oh. We may run into each other.
Okay.
We'll
I'll
talk
wave as
about
I
that
drive
later.
by on Route
Yeah.
66.
Yeah.
And then I'll be with Adrian again on the Oregon coast for his Best of the Northwest photo workshops. So he took over the company
Wonderful.
from me and he's invited me back. So I'm excited to be back and see some old and new faces.
Wonderful. I think last time you were here, you were also with a few of the folks from Photo Cascadia. What's that group got cooking? Is there anything that you guys are working on?
Well, our annual calendar is for sale that we do through our publisher, and we've been working on a book that we're trying to figure out how to present it, and I think it's going to be a good project once we figure it all out, and that's just going to take time. So,
Yeah. So you did the Oregon book and then the Washington book as a group,
correct. Yep.
right?
And now we're working on something probably more substantial as far as
Wow.
teaching or as far as philosophy or all of the above.
Wow. Well, I'll put links to those books as well. They're definitely worthwhile if you're a fan of the Northwest to have on your bookshelf. They're beautiful, beautiful books.
Let's put the link up for David's Japanese garden books
Oh yeah,
as
for
well.
sure. Lots of
They're
good
worth
books.
having. They're worth
Last minute
having.
Christmas gifts, folks.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
David, it's been too long, and man, I got to tell you, I really envy you for just having I mean, you went to Korea. You didn't go to Japan or Hawaii or Europe. I mean, you went to a place that isn't as visited photographically as a lot of other places, and I commend you for doing that and doing all the research that you put in to make it what you did. When some of your images are going to be up on your websites, you and Sean?
Yeah, and I think Sean might have some up already. Mine will probably go on the website after the new year. So
Okay.
I am posting them on social media, my Facebook photography page, David M. Cobb photography page on Facebook, and also Instagram. I've posted a few on that too. So, but on my website, I'll probably have those up after the new year.
Well, good. Um, I guess folks can find those links on your website, which we will post here on the show notes as well if people want to contact you or look at your stuff on Facebook and Instagram. Well, John, anything, did I miss anything? I think you nailed everything that,
No, I think we covered it, David. Is there any last minute words of wisdom on international photography travel or philosophy of life?
other than coming to see me in the Smokies, what's your next trip?
Uh,
Yeah, my next trip is probably to Southern California with my wife. So, other than that,
that's
we
probably
might
that's
head to
probably
Europe,
sca- that's
but
probably scarier than going to Korea.
yeah, no, it's crowded there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, it
In
has
certain
some
parts of LA,
similarities.
you'd think you were in Korea.
Yeah,
We used to go there for there's some great food down there, if you know where.
there's
Oh,
some
for
great
sure.
food,
Yeah.
definitely. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm searching out good Korean restaurants in Portland now, and they're few and far between. So I've got to find the one I really like there. So
Maybe you should open one in Mosier.
yeah, I don't want to lose a lot of money.
Well, David, thank you for being here. Everybody, for those of you who listened, made it through this podcast, thank you all. If you have any questions, comments, we do have a Gmail address that you could send them to us. It would be wetalkphoto@gmail.com. Any ideas on some interesting people you'd like us to get a hold of? We'd like to have your input as well. And John, anything
No,
on your end?
sir. I think we covered it all.
Well, David, thank you for being here. We'll get you back for hopefully, I think the fifth or sixth time, and it's never enough. The time goes so fast when you're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.